Today we're joined by Mark Fletcher, the Chief Executive of Manchester Pride. We're going to be discussing some issues that affect the LGBTQ plus community. So to start off, Mark, a lot of people know about Manchester Pride Festival, but don't know so much about the charity work that Manchester Pride does throughout the year. Please, could you give us an idea of the sort of work that you do? For example, any campaigns that you're currently working on?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you're quite right. It's still quite shocking to me when I realise it, but a lot of people do not realise that Manchester Pride is a charity. So throughout the year, we've got a whole host of different initiatives and campaigns that we're involved with. Some of the things that are hot right now, well, we have our Superbia programme, which is Manchester Pride's calendar of culture that runs all year round. Right now, pressing and high up on our agenda is our All Equals Charter. So just before we went into lockdown, we launched our All Equals Charter off the back of research and surveys that we've been conducting over the past 2 years. Recognising the levels of discrimination experienced by LGBTQ plus people for other protected characteristics. It started off when we had reports of racism of LGBTQ plus BAME people being experienced at our festival. It made me stop and think, and then lo and behold, just as the issue was raised, I experienced racism at our festival as the head of the organisation, and I was quite stunned and shocked to the core, really, about the ignorance in which this racist comment was made towards me, and clearly lack of education or understanding on the behalf of the person who was saying it. So we delved deeper into it, really, to scratch beneath the surface, and we uncovered some horrific tales of racism that was rife. And then when we started that conversation, this was back in 2018, we recognised the levels of ableism as well, and transphobia and biphobia and misogyny that still existed in LGBTQ plus safe spaces throughout Greater Manchester. So we created a charter, and it's a living, breathing initiative for organisations to pledge to implement change through processes in the workplace. And destinations and venues, so leisure facilities, so that LGBTQ plus people can see that organisations are taking steps to recognise, call out and prevent discrimination against them for not only sexual identity and gender, but all of the other protected characteristics identified. We beta tested it at the back end of 2019, and we had some really large corporations sign up to it nationally, as well as some smaller local businesses, because we wanted to make sure it was accessible to everybody. And yeah, it's been really well received. It aligns itself and sits alongside other charters that are currently in existence. It supports the work of Stonewall's Workplace Equality Index, but it's quite unique in the sense that it actually calls out actions that have to be taken in order for organisations to be certified on this charter. And us starting this in Manchester and taking ownership for it, and we've had so much buy-in from business communities and public sector that we're really proud to see some of the national chains that have jumped onto this as well and wanting to align themselves with it. Spoken a long time there about just one of the campaigns that we're involved with. Aside from this, what we like to do is we talk to our audiences. So we ask people what they'd like to see from us. I'm how would you put it? I'm a custodian for Manchester Pride right now. I'm the CEO, but I don't own it. It's not my business. I'm just really fortunate to work there and to be able to do the work that we're doing. So it's important for me to make that clear to everybody when I'm talking, in order for people to understand how we take our approach to what it is that we do. And we're led by people who want to engage with us. So we have listening exercises throughout the year. We conduct surveys on our festival, on our events, and we ask people what they would like to see from us. And one of the overriding things that we get back is more campaigning. And so we ask for people to give us an insight as to what they'd like to see when it comes to campaigning. And supporting our LGBTQ plus BAME people and communities off the back of the research that we did 2 years ago, we introduced a new visual identity for Manchester Pride, which incorporated 2 additional stripes on the rainbow flag, the freedom flag. Now, we tend to use the progression flag, which also includes the chevrons with trans colours on it as well today. But at the time, the reason for us to do that was to draw focus to the issues of racism amongst LGBTQ plus communities. And I myself was then put out to task at the time of launching that visual identity, I was almost cast out and felt alienated by some of my peers from leaders of other organisations who were aligned with mine, who fell silent and didn't really want to align themselves with me, because I guess they were scared of the backlash which we received, because people were shocked, I guess. But what was evident through that campaign that we initiated was that this level of racism is rife. And since we did that, I'm really proud that I was supported by a board of trustees to take that decision. Since we drew focus to that issue and started using the new colours on our flag, there was a movement that was created around the UK from other Pride organisations and commercial partners and business sponsors of Manchester Pride Festival. And we started a global conversation. It wasn't the first time the conversation had been started, but this time it was supported by actions. Because I was encouraging every organisation that was engaged with us to hear this story, to listen, to understand, and to support it by embracing the new visual identity. That's just another example of the type of campaign that we'd be involved with. And again, it's off the back of what it is that our audience asks us to do. There's quite a lot of work that takes place at Manchester Pride HQ. So it's not just a case of us putting our feet up in September once the festival's passed.
Yeah, and obviously the physical festival isn't happening this year because, you know, nothing is really. But so how has the COVID-19 pandemic disproportionately affected the LGBT community, and what impact has the lockdown had on the community? What have you seen?
Yeah, well, you know, the word that you struck upon there is key. Disproportionately affected LGBTQ plus people. That's exactly how this COVID-19 pandemic and the subsequent lockdown has affected LGBTQ plus people. LGBTQ plus people suffer from isolation, and stats prove that the impact of that on negative mental health as well, issues surrounding loneliness and isolation. It's difficult for many LGBT plus people to be themselves at the best of times. So when we were facing what was clearly the worst of times, not being able to be around anybody, the level of loneliness and isolation was further enhanced. To not be, you know, if there were many people, as an example, for those who may be thinking we were all isolated. If you live at home and you're not out in the family situation that you're in, or it's against the faith of the family that you belong to, and you're having to suppress your sexual identity, the mental harm that can do is significant. We know that. And if you're unable to leave that space and you're not able to express yourself or have the levels of freedom that you are looking for out and about in society, then it's quite clear to see just how damaging that could be. And then there's a real sense of, there is a sense of togetherness with LGBTQ plus communities for people who are plugged in and feel part of communities. I say communities because I don't, for one, believe that there is this singular LGBTQ plus euphoric community where we all belong. It's part of our identities, but there are many different communities, like there are in anything, because there are many different interests in life, and therefore many different people that you might choose to be around. But collectively, if you are plugged into those communities and that's your lifeline, and that keeps you in that, and that's a big part of who you are and what you do, then naturally, if you're not able to express yourself in that way, it's really going to take its toll. Now, we did a lot of work when we first came into lockdown in light of that, really, to recognise that the plight that's going to be faced by people, and it was one of the reasons that we see, you know, we suggested, well, we researched a number of different events and then put forward our Friday night gig, Live in Your Living Room, that ran for a period of 8 weeks, I think it was. And again, it was to make sure that we're engaging with our audiences, that people still feel connected with our organisation, they know we're here. We can signpost them to any service providing charities that they needed. But most importantly, because of the way that our audience interacts with us, so that we can provide a sense of fun. So Friday night, Live in Your Living Room is a series of concerts, some of which have been recorded from previous Manchester Pride festivals, and some of the content was brand new that we were able to commission through grants we received from Arts Council England, to support some of the brilliant homegrown talent in Greater Manchester. One of the highlights of which was the Manchester Queen show. But we did that specifically to recognise that people wanted something to look forward to and to be engaged with us at a time where they were disproportionately affected, because isolation is something that many LGBT plus people, like I say, have faced at the best of times.
Mark, you alluded to it a little earlier when you mentioned the Charter, but in recent years there's been a push for equality, diversity and inclusion in the workplace. How can we incentivise employers to implement those policies at work?
I guess through conversation and through presenting some of the research of studies that have been held and conducted over the past 3 years, which display that productivity levels are increased massively when people can be their whole selves and bring them whole selves to the workplace. So if you're looking at it from a purely commercial perspective, there are gains to be made from any organisation by ensuring that their people and their workforce feel comfortable to be who they are in their workplace. Twin to that, the social responsibility to make sure that you are looking after your workforce and encourage them to be who they are and to support all levels of diversity. And to not just to promote diversity, but to ensure that you've got a truly inclusive workspace, is to listen to your people and find out what do they feel is an inclusive workplace, what would they value from an employer. A lot of times it can, it's a big ask to expect somebody to out themselves, as an example, in the workplace if they don't feel comfortable. If I walked into a new job interview, you can't mistake the colour of my skin, but you wouldn't recognise what my sexual identity was unless I decided to tell you. And we have to be respectful of that and make people feel comfortable to be who they are in any environment. When it comes to taking actions, there's a lot. Obviously, I'm going to be a big advocate for the All Equals Charter. Check out allequalscharter.com. Which give you some key tips without even signing up to pledge to it, as to thinking about what inclusion in workspace looks like. And it's that word inclusion that I like to focus on much more right now, because there's a lot of fantastic work that's being done for equality and diversity. But inclusion is a step further. And for me, the best way to make sure that you're creating an inclusive space is to be talking to your people. Like I said, the stats and the evidence is out there. If you compare and contrast with different workplaces, different organizations, what policies they do, what they adopt, what their people think of them, and then whether or not they are feeling they are able to be their authentic self in the workplace. All of the research that I've seen shows that productivity levels are higher and workplace satisfaction is through the roof.
Yeah, and you kind of touched on it with the last question as well, but with more corporations and institutions wanting to be part of Pride events, how do you, obviously they can look at the Charter, but how can we make sure that they maintain their integrity and sense of identity, whenever within the communities as well as with the companies?
Yeah, that's a challenge, and there are some organisations that do this terribly. Those are the organisations that don't seem willing to listen, and it's a shame, because a lot of the times it's the best intentions that are there, but again, the way in which they play out could be. And I guess I think what you're alluding to there is maybe at the time of a Pride festival, you might see every organisation in the city turning their logo into the colours of the rainbow. Which is a great sign of support, but it doesn't mean anything unless it's supported by actions and meaning. There's a lot of cynicism, throughout the world right now, because of the way in which some commercial organisations over the past couple of years have seemed to do exactly that. To put a rainbow logo all over their organisation, to promote that they are putting a rainbow logo all over their organisation, but actually then to have complaints from people within their workforce who feel they can't be who they are, or to see some support of countries in which it's still illegal to be LGBTQ+. And it's this level of questioning and social responsibility and awareness that organisations need to check in with when thinking about what it is that they want to get from celebrating Pride. Again, it's really important to remember, LGBTQ+ Pride is a movement. It's not just for one day. And certainly for me, I get really frustrated when I see Pride Month which is an Americanism that was not born in the UK. You know, as a head of an organisation of one of the UK's largest Pride celebration, it's quite frustrating given that Pride Month takes place in June, and the Pride Festival that I'm responsible for overseeing the delivery of takes place in August. Pride is a movement that's there all year round. And I think for anybody or any organisation that wants to be part of and support a Pride organisation and or celebration, they need to really listen, sit back and understand that, recognise some of the issues and challenges that are faced by LGBTQ plus people in 2020, and think about how they can support them and work towards a change. It's incredible. I am an advocate for commercial supporters of Pride events. You know, my background, I hail from a commercial background. Before I stepped into this role, I was a sponsorship consultant for Manchester Pride, and it was my role to bring in organisations to get funding so that we could deliver our events to the level at which people have become accustomed to seeing today. And the conversation that I've had over the years have changed. There's some difficult times when I first started in that role. Some organisations were clearly homophobic in their approach towards not wanting their brand to be seen overtly by their non-LGBT plus audiences. So wanting to do below the line activity, for example, that was hidden in the festival site, but didn't want to be part of the parade where people would see their logo because that might appear on TV, and then they might alienate their non-LGBT plus audiences. So these conversations were tricky, challenging, but I'm not one to steer clear from challenging conversation, especially where I can provide people with a few insights and a bit more information that's going to help them educate themselves and pass that on. So what the commercialisation of certain aspects of Manchester Pride Festival has enabled us to do is to deliver a world-class event that's subsidised with commercial income and sponsorship. What's unique to us with what we do at Manchester Pride is we have that conversation from day one. So if somebody wants to be engaged with us or be a part of the parade, or even better, wants to support us through sponsorship, then we take time to find out about their organisation. We've had some brilliant examples of organisations that have become engaged with us and absolutely changed what it means at the core of their organisation to champion, support and recognise what's needed for LGBTQ people. Sadly, we saw the demise of one of them, Thomas Cook Airlines, last year was an incredible example of change through being engaged with Manchester Pride Festival. And we're seeing more of it now. In fact, Virgin Atlantic is an incredible organisation that's doing just that right now. They're a sponsor, again, for Manchester Pride Festival. But what they're doing is looking at what they do and how they talk to people authentically within the organisation, so that by the time it comes to them putting the rainbow colours associated with their logo, it's authentic. And I guess the only way to do that, like I say in most things, is to have that conversation, to strip it back, and to be respectful and understand a movement before you pledge allegiance to it.
So you've just been talking more then about sort of Pride events themselves and the companies and corporations involved, but in terms of LGBT people themselves, what opportunities can these partnerships between sort of companies or organisations and the Pride events themselves, what opportunities can they bring to the people themselves, the LGBT plus people?
Yeah, well, over the past couple of years, we've seen some incredible examples of how this has been brought to life and how it's played out. It's through career opportunities. So there've been organisations that have worked with us, who've marched in the parade, who have wanted to be a sponsor to show their support and to help us deliver what we're doing. And their key message has not necessarily been an overtly brand exercise. It's been a message to talk to people, to let our audiences know, to let LGBTQ plus people know that they are welcomed to go and work within these organisations. And it's almost these organisations laying themselves bare on a market stall, laying their wares on the stall so people can see exactly who they are, what they do, how they're operating, what they're about, and how there's definitely a place for LGBTQ plus people to be a part of their organisation. A great example of some of that work at the moment of a partner we've been working with, I would say Auto Trader. And I guess Auto Trader, the nature of the industry that they work in was predominantly for many, many years perceived to be a straight male bias, because it was the motor industry and because it was motor publication. They have done incredible work. They've authenticated their internal staff networks. They've spoken to their people. They've gone through the process that I identified earlier of asking their people what it is that they want to do. And there are success stories that they could highlight there about the recruitment drive that they've experienced off the back of their engagement with Manchester Pride Festival. And I can know that the same was done with Thomas Cook Airlines. The same has been done with Cooperative in the past. The same has been done, I believe, with Swinton Insurance. Again, some of them organisations that you think would have a natural affinity, attraction or draw to an LGBT plus festival in that way. But it's, LGBT plus people can be terribly loyal, not terribly, brilliantly loyal to organisations that are garnering genuine support. And I've seen that when we work with partners. And I think if you can build that level of trust and people can see themselves within your organisation, you can't really do more than that or ask for more than that. And we have worked with a couple of organisations to tell that story to our audience, so that people can understand that the next time that they see this organisation at one of our events and they're talking about recruitment, it's authentic and they want you to go and work for them. Yeah, that's been quite an interesting one for me. Some really nice stories there, in fact.
Yeah, and following on from that, really, I suppose maybe even with companies who aren't directly involved with Manchester Pride, basically any company can throw a rainbow flag on their logo for a month and expect the LGBT community to provide them with their support. So what would you say about companies like that? How can we deal with that?
There's always a fine line there, because I'm a believer that wherever you see the freedom flag, again, it sparks progress, and it's going to get people talking. People who maybe didn't even understand what that flag signified, a few years ago, will begin to understand what it means. And for me, it's incredibly important to have that level of visibility throughout the city at any time of the year. Not least Manchester Pride Festival or any other city, not least during their Pride celebration. But it is, again, for me, it's that authenticity. It's, if you're going to do that, then you need to declare what it is you're doing to support the Pride movement. Are you supporting a charity like Manchester Pride or like Pride in London, that an organisation that is putting on this celebration that works and campaigns for LGBT plus awareness throughout the year, or are you just doing this as an exercise to gain favour? It's just that level of questioning and not being afraid to question yourself. Why are we doing it? And is it authentic? And what can we do to make sure we are being authentic? For me, the best thing to do is to engage with local Pride organizer, pick up that phone, get in contact, ask them how they, what kind of support can we give you, and then it enables a narrative to be driven by authenticity, our willingness to support LGBT plus people, and it doesn't always have to be commercially either. There's so many ways that support can be garnered, even could be through sharing social media posts, remarking upon, I don't know, a piece in the press, anything like that. There are many different ways that organisations can display that authenticity. I wouldn't say stop putting your rainbow flags up, stop changing your logos. I would say if you're going to do that, then make sure that it comes from the right place and that you are supporting that Pride celebration or Pride movement that you're claiming to be a part of.
Yeah, I think that's everything. We've pretty much bang on half an hour, I think, as well. So perfect timing. So yeah, thank you very much for speaking to us, Mark. And yeah, we'll hopefully have the vlog up to share quite soon, and we can post it around. So yeah, thanks again.
Not at all. It was a pleasure talking to you. I can talk too much sometimes. So yeah, I should have warned you to rein me in if I get too carried away.
No, I think it's really insightful and quite interesting. I think there'll be a lot of people who watch this who, particularly because there's quite a lot of the questions, there's quite a wide ranging areas. And I think I found quite interesting your personal experience with racism, but also you mentioned the additional colours to the flag, because I think it was like a couple of years ago, and there was, I remember in the media there's quite a lot of sort of comments on that, and I think a lot of people maybe it's helpful to hear a more personal experience with that. So yeah, thank you. It was really interesting.
Good. You're welcome. I've enjoyed talking to you.